In this video, we're going to talk about the different types of brushes in Adobe Illustrator CC 2020 and why and when you might want to use different types of brushes and how to make your own. So to start, I'm going to pull out the brushes panel. If your setup is set up differently than mine, you can access the brushes panel under Window, or it's the little icon that looks like paintbrushes, 3 different kinds of paintbrushes hanging out. Also under Window and Brushes. One of the things I love about Illustrator, but that can also be really frustrating, is each one of these panels, you can actually accidentally close the panel using the little X. And so if your panel's not showing up, you can't find it. Again, Window and Brushes. There's the brush panel. So this is our brush panel, and I've already taken the liberty of drawing a few straight line segments so we can talk about the different kinds of brushes and how and when you might use them. By default, we have just a basic stroke, and this is a stroke that's determined by the color of your stroke in your that you use every day, and we'll use green. And the width of the stroke. This can be affected by the strokes panel. One of my favorite things to do with these strokes is actually to play with the width profile, thicken them up, make them thicker, make them thinner, all kinds of other things. We'll come back to that in a little bit, but that's a basic stroke. Basic stroke just follows a line, not much to it. The second kind of brush we have is a calligraphic brush stroke, and these are the ones up at the top. They show up as just a little round or square shape. There's a touch calligraphic brush, a 5-point flat. When I click these on a straight line, they vary a little bit, but not drastically. And again, I can change the color of these. I can increase the point size of them. And where these get particularly interesting is when we have lines that have thick and thins, because they act like a calligraphy brush, like a calligraphic nib. You're going to get flats and thins, ups and downs that are more interesting. That's a calligraphic brush. We'll come back to those in just a minute. The third kind of brush, or the second kind of brush, there used to be a whole bunch of defaults that showed up in your brushes panel. Now you have to access them from the libraries. I don't even know if they're in here anymore. And that is scatter brushes. Oh, there we go. Decorative scatter brush. So scatter brushes are like the confetti of paint brushes. They take a piece of artwork and they apply it across a line. So there's one example, here's another, and another, and another. We'll come back and look at those again in detail in just a minute. But I wanted to give you just a quick preview of what those look like. The third kind of brush is a natural media brush. And these are, and I'm actually talking through these, I think, in the order that they are in the new brush dialog box. Scatter, art, oh nope, art. We can talk about art brushes. The next kind of brush is an art brush, and art brushes are actually artwork that are stretched across a path. The path can be straight, the path can be crooked. So there's an example. Also, an art brush, as an example, are the any kind of brush that has a, sorry about that, any kind of brush that has a beginning or an end. So like this is actually a divider brush for that you could use on, I'm just going to give you a real quick rectangle with this so that you can see what it does, because it's a cool brush. Like if you're using a square and you apply that, it gives you that sort of feeling like a certificate, or multiple lines going in multiple directions. Really kind of an interesting brush. Then we have art brushes. These are made to imitate natural media painting. So there's a whole assortment of these by default in Illustrator. And Then last but not least, we have a brush called a pattern brush. And a pattern brush takes artwork and repeats it across a line. So the default one in the brushes panel is denim seam. So those are the different types of brushes that exist, but I want to walk you through the process of making each one of these kinds of brushes and what you need and what would be interesting. So I'm going to, again, take our strokes here. I'm going to make a copy of them. I'm using the Alt key, the Option key on a Mac, and clicking and dragging to make duplicates of them. And if you don't release the keys in the right order, then you don't have duplicates after all. Mouse button keys. Okay, so I am going to actually just take these all back to a plain old black stroke with a basic brush stroke and no width profile, uniform stroke, 1 point. We're back to basics. Okay, so the first kind of brush stroke that we can make using the new brush dialog box is a calligraphic brush. So there are 3 kinds of brushes I can make without any artwork selected. One is a calligraphic brush, one is a bristle brush, and one is a pattern brush. To make an art brush or a scatter brush, I have to create the artwork first. So we're going to start with a calligraphic brush. And this is going to bring up a dialog box that allows me to determine what is this tip shape going to look like. I can work with it mathematically, or I can work with it visually. I like to work with it visually, and I can rotate and angle that tip. If I have a pressure sensitive stylus, I can determine whether that stylus is going to react with this brush in a certain way. I can determine if it's random, if it's pressure based, all those kinds of things. I don't actually have a stylus hooked up to this computer, so none of those are options. A tablet. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. I tend to name these in a really funny way, actually really boring way. Like I would call this calligraphic 53 degrees, 20%, and 9 points. And I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. You can name these however you want. There's my new brush. When I hover over it, the name shows up. All I have to do to use that brush, click on the path, click on the brush, and it's automatically applied. Again, when I grab my paintbrush, that's the tip that's selected, and so now I'm painting with that new calligraphic brush that I just created. We're going to look next at the this natural media art brush, or bristle brush, that's what they call them. I want you to see that also, and then we're going to make some art and we're going to make our own brushes. So this natural media brush or bristle brush, in order to make a bristle brush, all you have to do is click the new brush button and you're going to choose bristle brush. We're going to get a totally different menu this time with lots more options. It starts with the shape of the tip. So this is just like going to the paint store and selecting a brush. You can choose round or flat. You can choose pointed or blunt or curved or angled or fan brushes. I'm going to choose a flat blunt brush. My favorite paintbrush is a number 10 Bright, which is just this little short stubby brush, and I just love them. There's probably something wrong with me. I can choose the size. Let's make it 10 millimeters. We'll make it a little bigger. I can choose whether or not the bristles are very short or very long. I like a really short little number 10 bristle brush. How dense are the bristles? This is how many painting tips does it need to use. I'm going to go ahead and move that way up. How thick are the bristles? Are they really thick or are they really fine? This is all going to affect the way that this art or the brush is applied to the page. The next one, paint opacity. Is this gouache or acrylic paint that's very dark, or is it translucent, very faint, pale watercolor? Sliding along the paint opacity is going to help you determine that about this brush. And then, is the brush really flexible? Is it soft? Or is it very stiff? My little number 10 bristle brush is actually pretty, or number 10 bright is actually pretty stiff. The bristles are very short. There's quite a few of them. And I tend to like to paint with gouache with it. So gouache is very opaque. We'll make it not quite that opaque. We'll go like 96%. So I'm going to name this one. I'm going to name it Betsy's gouache brush. For those of you that aren't familiar, gouache is opaque watercolor paint. So it works like watercolor, but it dries flat and matte. It's, I think, pretty cool. You can buy two different kinds of it, acrylic or water-based, and the water-based paint works just like watercolor. You can reactivate it. Really good. Lots of graphic designers use gouache quite frequently. So I'm going to apply that to that stroke, and then I'm going to get my paintbrush and show you again what that looks like as I paint with it. This is actually a whole bunch of different little pieces if I were to ever break it down. But one of the things that's really amazing about this, about painting in Illustrator, as opposed to painting in Photoshop or another natural media tool, is that these are all still strokes. So I can come in with my selection tool and I can choose any one of these paths at any point in time and change the color. I can change the stroke that's on it, or the type of brush that was used on it. I can change all kinds of things to really make, I can change the thickness of this stroke to really affect the way that it is applied in my work. So that's kind of neat, a little bit different than Photoshop or some of the other tools that are out there. The next brush that we're going to look at, I told you we were going to make some work, or we were going to make some stuff. I'm actually going to start with just a very simple little brush or piece of artwork. Matter of fact, I'm going to start with a circle. Plain old, good old-fashioned circle. And I'm going to fill this circle with, oh, I don't know, that's not a circle. There we go, there's a circle. I'm going to fill the circle with green. And I am going to click, and with my circle selected, I'm going to click the new brush button. And we are going to start by making a scatter brush. So a scatter brush, remember, is like confetti, and this can be managed however you would like. So if you have, again, if you have a pressure sensitive tablet, a stylus, you have the ability to change the way these are applied. I'm just going to choose random for all of these because I'm just using mouse. So the first number is going to be the minimum, the second is going to be the maximum. And we're going to start with what is the size compared to my actual artwork. How much this exact piece that I'm using as the brush tip, how much larger or smaller do I want to allow this to go? So we'll make it 50%. Let it be 50% to 150%. The spacing, do I want them crunched together, or do I want them way far apart? I think I don't want them overlapping. So I'm going to let the spacing be from 100 to 200%. These numbers can be whatever you want. Notice that my 200% hardly moves that cursor or that marker from the middle. It can go all the way up to 1000%. So this is just a really minimal amount. Scatter. How many of these do I want? What percentage of them do I want to be off of the path? So I'm going to go ahead in this case and I'm going to make it, let's go 50 to 150. Those are just easy numbers. And then this is a circle, so the rotation 100% does not matter. Where this would be interesting is if I had made an arrow, or if I had a star or a shape that is very clearly related, you know, obviously has an up and a down. The next option here is, what is that rotation relative to? Is it relative to the path, or is it relative to the page? The last option we have here, in some ways I think, and actually I think Adobe knows this is a very confusing option. It has to do with how this brush tip is colored. All the other brush tips we've worked with so far, when I change the color of the stroke, the brush changes. But when we start to get into scatter brushes, art brushes, and pattern brushes, that color may or may not change. So Adobe knows this is confusing. Here's a little tool tip. The little light bulb will show you what these look like. So if I change to tints, it's going to make everything the same shade or the same color as whatever my artwork is. If I use tints and shades, I'm going to get lights and darks all the way to black, all the way to white of that same color. Or I can use hue shift. I love hue shift. I think it's the easiest one to use. However, if you have artwork that has very specific colors to it, sometimes you can get wonky, weird stuff going on. So just something to be aware of. Tints and shades, hue shift will all allow it to change color. If you choose none, it's going to stay whatever color it was to start with. So we're going to go ahead and click OK. And my scatter brush will show up. There it is. And oh, I didn't name it, so it's really just called Scatter Brush 1, which is fine. I'm going to click our path, and I'm going to apply that that scatter brush, and you can see that it scatters off of the line. Now let me share with you. If I double click that, one, it will reapply it so I can see if I like it better. Two, it will bring up the dialog box. So if I need to edit this, if I want to tweak it, I'm not real happy with the way it worked, I have the ability to do that while the brush stroke is live, as I'm determining what I really want it to look like. If I want the scatter to be, the negative is below your path, the positive is above your path. So maybe I want it to be a little bit more equal across the path. Maybe I want the side spacing to be a little bit tighter. And then when I'm happy with it, I'm going to go ahead and click OK. Adobe's going to ask me if I want to apply it to the stroke that is existing, and in this case I do. If I want that to be a different color, because I chose hue shift, all I have to do is come up here, change the color, and it's going to be the color of my stroke. So that is the scatter tool. The next one we're going to talk about, I'm actually going to take our little circle here and I am going to tweak it up a little bit. I'm going to grab that anchor point and stretch it out here and make it a corner so that we have just a nice little, I don't know, blobby comet shape. And let's change the color of it just because I want to. Make it orange. Now we're going to use an art brush. So this tip, I'm going to go ahead and have it selected. I'm going to make an art brush this time. An art brush takes whatever artwork you have. This artwork can be that shape. It could also be this crazy brush stroke I have up here, and we may use that in just a minute. And you are going to take this and stretch it along the length of the path that you're working with. You have a few options. One is the width. Is the width fixed, or does it work with, again, your pressure sensitive tablet? If it's works with your pressure sensitive tablet or any of those other options, you'll set a minimum and a maximum. The scaling options have to do with how do you want this brush to scale. We're going to look at those again in just a minute when I give you a little bit more interesting artwork. Then we have our direction. So this determines the end of the arrow without the arrowhead determines the start point of your line. And the arrowhead is the finish of your line. So with this particular orientation, when I draw the path or when I use the paintbrush tool, it's going to start in the wide end and go to the thin end here. So I'm actually just going to leave this one just like it is, just a quick, easy, okay, because I want to go ahead and grab my paintbrush tool with this brush selected. I always think it's funny. I make a brush and then I select it and it puts it on the artwork I had selected. And I did not change our the colorization method, so this one's going to be orange no matter what. And I just want you to see what happens when I paint with this brush. When I paint with this brush, it starts at the thick end and finishes at the thin end. Whether I go straight, whether I go forwards, whether I go backwards, wherever I start is the thick end, wherever I finish is the thin end. This is a great type of brush if you're making grass or ferns or any sort of greenery or hair or fur. It's kind of a cool brush. I'm going to double click on this because remember I said that that arrow is going to dictate which direction this goes. If I click the other direction and click OK, it's going to ask me, remember, do you want me to apply it to all the strokes? I'm going to say yes, and they will all flip direction. So if you happen to go the wrong way, it's not a big deal. Likewise, I don't have to just go left to right. I can go up and down. And when I do that, we're going to get something totally different. And in that case, we're going to get these kind of weird, wide shapes. Now, the fun thing about these brushes is that they can be applied not only to paths, but to shapes. I can actually apply that brush to a shape, and there is a nice little moon-shaped lickety-darn split for you without much effort. So that is an art brush. I'm going to get rid of all these so that we can talk. Well, we'll put it on one of these right there. I'm going to go back to just our nice little shape though, so you can remember what that looked like. And there is the art brush. I want to show you one more thing about the art brush though, and I'm actually going to use this guy here. So this is a path that has a brush stroke applied to it. It's the calligraphic brush stroke that we made, and I'm going to make a new art brush, and we're going to talk about some of the other things we can do with the art brush. So there's that direction. I can scale this proportionally. If I scale it proportionally, it's going to keep that same orientation. It won't stretch it out at all. But what's really interesting is this idea of stretch between guides. Stretch between guides allows me to determine both a starting portion that should not be distorted and an ending portion that should not be distorted. So in this case, I'm going to make sure that I have this nice crisscross right here where those paths intersect. That's a really good starting point or finishing point. Think about these like arrowheads. There's a nice spot where it's just one path. We don't have to worry about them getting all wonky. And I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And then I'm going to click off our artwork. I'm going to grab my paintbrush and I'm going to paint with that. And what you're going to see is that when I do, I've got to apply it because I was still on our calligraphic brush there, that the beginning matches, right? I could move this right up there. It matches perfectly. The ending matches, but the area in the middle has been stretched out. That can be really handy when you want to do something like, I've created brushes that look like pencils so that I can stretch a pencil across a page and twist it and all kinds of other things. And as long as it is in that shape, it's just fine. Matter of fact, I'm going to pull this artwork out. This is really cool. You can actually pull any brush out artwork out of the brush and put it on your desktop there. And I'm going to turn this into sort of a pencil so that you can see what I'm talking about real fast. Oh, that needs to be a rectangle. Rectangles are your friend. Let's make a rectangle. I'm actually going to pull it this way so that I can line it up real good. We'll fill it yellow. I'm using the eyedropper tool. Here's our tip. We're going to change the color of the tip. Now it's telling me it's a group, and it is a group because Illustrator puts a clipping path on that shape to figure out where the tile is. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that part. We'll move that up there. We're going to tweak the color of this really quick. I'm going to use the color panel for that. Lighten it up, make it a nice beige wood color. And last but not least, my other pencil tip trick. And make an ellipse right there. I am going to grab the Shape Builder tool. If you're not familiar with the Shape Builder tool, this tool is brilliant. I'm going to get rid of that part. I'm going to click that part right there. And now I can turn this black. And we'll use the same trick down here really fast to make a eraser. Actually, we'll just draw an eraser. It'll be the world's fastest eraser, and that's just fine. Okay, so here we have a pencil. Not the world's greatest pencil, but it was quick. And I'm going to use this pencil to make an art brush. So there is our dialog box again. I'm going to click Art Brush, and I'm going to use that same stretch between guides. I want to stretch, we'll leave the eraser, we'll leave the tip, we want those to be the same, and that space in between then can stretch. We'll go ahead and click OK. Oh, you know what, I'm going to do one more thing before we actually use this, and that is I'm going to change this to hue shift. This is a great example of showing you how hue shift works, and we'll get rid of the stroke on that. Okay, so now we have this pencil that is a paintbrush. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out. I'm going to give us a new layer so that I can hide this layer and you don't have to see all the things. And okay, so I'm going to use the pencil brush. I am going to make my pencil brush, well, we're going to start with the orange that it was to start with, because I have used, and we're going to use a circle. We're just going to make an ellipse with this pencil brush. We'll apply the pencil brush, and there you can see that that brush just stretches right around the circle so that you have a frame. Here we'll use the paintbrush tool with the pencil brush. Same kind of thing. Beginning of the brush, or the eraser stays the right proportion, the tip stays the right proportion, and the pencil in between those two stretches. Now here's where that hue shift situation gets interesting. I'm going to go ahead and change the color, and when I do that you'll see that the colors all change in proportion to one another, which is cool. It's a great way to make colored pencils really fast. And that is the art brush. So the last kind of brush that we have is the pattern brush. I'll go ahead and leave those on that layer, and we'll make another new layer here. And I am going to start talking about the pattern brush with really simple artwork, like, again, just a circle. Although this could be a circle, it could be any shape you want it to be. So there is a circle. I'm not even going to fill it in. I am going to have it selected and make a new brush, in this case a pattern brush. The pattern brush, rather than stretching artwork along the path like the art brush does, repeats the artwork. And I have the ability to control a couple different things. One, the scale. Does it stay the same size? Again, if you have a pressure sensitive tablet, you can control the beginning size, the ending size, how it responds to pressure. You can also control the spacing. So the spacing is how much, how close they are together, or is there a little bit of dotted line quality to the way those repeats of that pattern sit next to each other. 100% means there's a full space in between. 0 means that they touch each other. You have the ability to flip along a path, or to stretch it if you need to, or to approximate the path, and again we can colorize. These boxes, these 5 boxes, determine how the tool works when you come to a sharp corner. So does it automatically center it? Does it try and auto slice it and make it as close to perfect as possible? Does it auto overlap it? There's lots of different options. Does it do nothing? And you have that for exterior corners, interior corners. Then we also have beginning options and ending options. These options come from your pattern tool. So if I wanted an ending, I would need to have a pattern to match. I'm not going to use the pompadour pattern. It's way too big for this. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. I'm just going to grab my brush, and then here is our dot pattern brush. Pretty quick, pretty easy. Again, this does respond to stroke size. So if I increase the size of the stroke, the circles get bigger. If I decrease the size of the stroke, the circles get smaller. Those circles could be anything. They could even be our pencil, right? I'll pull the pencil out and we'll select the pencil and make a pattern brush with the pencil. I'm not even going to pay attention. I'm going to do fixed, but I want it to be like, that's a pretty big pencil. Let's make it like 25%. And we'll hue shift because that's fun. There's my pencil. Here's my stroke. And now I have applied, let's make this a little bigger, 8 points. There's my pencil. There it is at 4. There it is at 2. So those are the brush tools in Illustrator, or the how to make your own brush in Illustrator. I hope you found that helpful. Thanks so much for your time. Have a great day.